Hello and welcome, Exiles, to the final update to the Energy Blade Spectral Throw Scion. I say final update because I'm in a bit of a competition with Connor to stack as much strength as possible, and I was pretty confident I could beat his strength stacking with this approach. That being said, he is going to be swapping his approach to a Widowhail Jug, which I think means I need to pull in the big guns, which means I'm going to go for Gagarf. So I figured I should probably post an update on the current setup of the character before I start changing things out to go for Righteous Fire as the pivot to get a bit more strength to make sure I can win this competition. Now let's go ahead and showcase a Minotaur map, just a pretty basic one, nothing too complicated here, and just give you a feel for what the character looks like. There's been a few different iterations of the character that I've tried out, and I will go over the different things I've been doing just to give you an idea, but I'm pretty happy with it overall in terms of how it has played out thematically, in terms of I wanted to throw lightsabers and it did that well. I will say this, Spectral Throw, Spectral Helix, overall, although I've enjoyed the character quite a lot, I can readily admit these skills are nowhere close to as good as the top tier skills. They just do not compete with things like Lightning Strike, Splitting Steel. They just have no comparable damage scaling. Like, I'll give you an example. Lightning Strike has a base effectiveness of like 450%. Spectral Throw has a base effectiveness of 150%. And you know what's funny about this? They both hit 3 times, which means if I were to click Lightning Strike, I would effectively just triple my damage, which I think is a little bit silly, to say the least. I probably should take off these defensive shrine because that gives me a bunch of extra % damage, so that way you can get a feel for what the actual damage of the character is. What Minotaur do is like dive attack. Is he gonna dive? He's not gonna dive. I was gonna wait for him to do his dive. He always starts out with that. But anyways, this is what the Spectral Throw single target looks like on. This is a GMP setup. Obviously, this isn't really set up for single target, but that just gives you an idea of what the single target looks like on the clear setup. Keep in mind, this character is very high invested at this point. Speaking of which, the reason I took so long to do an update video for the character was because I got to about 10k ES with the 2-hand setup, and then I started thinking about doing some really hard upgrades like farming a simplex and a helical, because the market was pretty non-existent for being able to buy those. Normally in a trade league you could just outright buy them for 20, 30, 40D, something that you could farm within a few hours, versus in this league we had to manually go SSF basically the simplex base. And we barely got away with buying a helical base. We were probably gonna have to farm that too if we didn't get if we didn't hit that most recent mist. I missed it about 3 times, and if we missed 3 times and had to go for a 4th one, I was probably gonna have to SSF farm that 4th base. Anyways, it took a while to get those upgrades together, but we finally did it. And this is the current situation. Our character has a split personality setup going all the way around where we're weaving around the tree. This is basically just to get a bunch of strength. We're at 3,700. I think as we upgrade the gear further, we could probably get this version of the build somewhere in the 4K to 4,500 range. If Connor can compete with that, with the bow juggernaut, and part of the reason I'm making this video is I might have to pull out the Giga Righteous Fire to get an even higher strength number, so that's something I'm going to be looking into. Now, that all being said, let's go over the main changes that happened since we were 2-hand. When we were 2-hand, we were using the Martial Mastery plus Martial Prowess 5 passive clusters, 8 passive clusters where you spend 5 passives in terms of travel nodes and jewel sockets. That was working great for 2-hand. 2-hand we initially did because easy, cheap 6-link and clusters that are really easy to craft. Those clusters, if they're level 50 to 67, you could make on an average of 6 fossils. Shuddering, Pristine, and Dense with a item level 50 to 67 will hit that basically Martial Mastery plus Martial Prowess travel nodes. It'll hit a 3 notable jewel in 1 out of 6 resonators. So we made those pretty easy. It was just really good early attack speed and gave us a bit of accuracy scaling. But now later on that we were able to get ourselves basically more proper large clusters and actually get a 6-link elsewhere, that's when we were just justifying swapping to 1-hand plus shield. 1-hand plus shield just makes the character way more tanky because you can get a recover on block shield. This is what we ended up going for. We got a chance to block plus, we were basically doing a recombination. The end goal was to get 8 PDR, but I didn't hit it on the recombination. I'll probably redo this shield eventually, but for right now, it's just a placeholder. Believe it or not, that +2 support gems, when it's applied to the enhance, gives us a lot of energy shield. Even though this is a shield that's a pure armor base, you may not believe it, but it's actually giving our character quite a lot of ES. Just an example of how much enhance does for energy blade. I'm going to take it off just so you can see what it does. We go from 20k ES to 17,000. So if you de-level your enhance, each level it goes down, you're losing 8 quality. So for example, this is 40 quality, we lose 1/5 of like 3k, so each 8 quality is giving like 600 ES to our end game energy blade, which is quite a lot of ES when the whole thing's considered. So yeah, anyways, I went for this specifically, the heat attuned shield, because it had high block chance and it had scorch, which is another 10 minus res on enemies, which just is a nice extra DPS bonus. And because it's a pure armor base, that means it was pretty easy, or a lot easier, to hit PDR and strength mods. I could have gone for like a hybrid base, but then it makes the PDR weighting lower. It adds int into the pool and some extra mods that I don't necessarily want, and it lowers the block chance. So that's why I went with a heat attune. This is a base you find in Heist. Fun fact about it is it's clearly like something's bugged with the influence on this, because you see all those little random little blue dots. That's just like a visual bug. Something's not right with a Crusader influence on the shield. There's very few items I've noticed this on. This is one of the few bases where the influence makes this weird dotty outline. That's not supposed to be there. That's just a, I guess, a visual bug specifically with this base itself. So yeah, one hand plus shield, you end up gaining some ES because you can get stuff like the plus support gems. You get a bunch of block, 52 attack block, 15 spell block. Mix in Tempest Shield, we're at 40, 52. And then I also swapped over to the Guardian Ascendancy from the Pathfinder once I got Pathfinder Jewels, which allows us to get another 10 spell and attack block. So we have about 60 attack block, 50 spell block, because we frost blink around and then we attack, and that's how we're generating the 10% block if blocked recently, along with a bunch of extra regen and recovery from Guardian, and that's what we swap to. Ultimately, you could just stay Pathfinder for a while until you're ready to make that swap. Another thing that changed with this swap is you'll notice we're on Chieftain. This was just to get pure percent strength, and we swapped it out of Guardian. Guardian was giving us endurance charges. Guardian's a bit more tanky because of the endurance charges, but ultimately late game, if I really min-max, I'd like to go for this type of ring, except with a plus minimum endurance charge, or we could get Enduring Composure somewhere into the build to get those endurance charges back. And when we swapped the tree around, we also picked up stun immunity, so we didn't need the stun immunity from the Juggernaut Ascendancy anymore. But yeah, the advantages of the one hand plus shield is you get a bit more ES, and you get essentially more tank through the shield. When I first swapped over, I did a Wrathpith, which made up for most of the damage loss from going from a one hand to a two hand. But ultimately, one hand plus shield will just be lower damage, lower defense, or sorry, the two hand will be higher damage but lower defense, and the one hand plus shield will be higher defense, lower damage. That's the sort of the trade-off you get when you make those swaps. And yeah, so that is pretty much the big changes. We went for some min-max items of the Simplex and the Helical. If you want to look up how to craft this sort of amulet, I have a crafting guide on a video for how to do the beast lock method, which is what I've done for the past 50 times I've crafted a Simplex. It's very reliable. I've done it multiple times in private leagues now where the supplies are pretty limited, and I can highly recommend it if you want to min-max a stat stacking character. This is what I'd recommend to do. It's the beast lock method, where you assemble essentially a lot of the bases to check recombinations onto, or not recombination, awaken orbs onto, and it works pretty efficiently for getting yourself that 3 perfect stat Simplex. The Helical, of course, is a essence craft until you hit all attribute, and then you bench craft on other mods that do not necessarily provide a really big net negative if they go not positive. For example, minus minimum endurance charges. All that does is it stops us from stacking plus minimum endurance charges. We can still generate endurance charges elsewhere in the build, like for example Enduring Composure, and there wouldn't be any downside in that situation. So it's one of those things where if it goes positive, it's really nice, but if it goes negative, it doesn't brick the ring. And then mana, if it goes negative, obviously a blood magic character, we don't care that we lost mana, that's fine. We did a recombination for the belt. I went with a heavy. You can also go with a Stygian here. Heavy bases are just a lot cheaper, and they get you more strength than Stygian does. Stygian is probably better min-max wise if you get a really good Abyssal Jewel, but again, the bases are more expensive, so that's another reason why we went with heavy. So yeah, that is a bit of the outlining of the character gear changes. We changed the pathing to go for split personality. And one other thing I will say, I did drop blood-soaked blade because I was mostly clearing with Arias End. At this point, my character's damage is good enough where I don't really care that I'm dropping the pen from Prismatic Tincture. That being said, Prismatic Tincture is just a ton of damage. You can also use Sap of Seasons. We get to about 45 to 50-ish tincture stacks before our Eternal Youth gets drained out. And if you get more recharge rate throughout the build, you can also make that number higher as well. I will say all you would do is change the pathing where you go straight this way and you drop this stuff in order to go Jewel Socket here and grab Blood-Soaked Blade. If you want to do it, that is higher damage, but I felt like at this point in the character, our damage was plenty fine, that I'd rather just have explodes while I'm clearing the map, so I added in Arias End. That was the reason for that change there. And then another thing I want to note is Sniper's Mark plus Mark on Hit. Ultimately, I think you need at least 4 tattoos of Tassilio Scout if you were going to drop, if you're going to run Sniper's Mark, because with the Mark on Hit, you get 16% reduced effective marks, and so I think you need to count that or counter that in order to maintain the additional split you get from Sniper's Mark. I'm not sure 100% how the splits work with Sniper's Mark and Spectral Throw, but sometimes it felt like if I didn't have the mark effect on it, it felt like I was maybe hitting the enemy less than I would otherwise with Spectral Throw, because like the way the splits branch off, it would make them branch off and then come back to me without hitting the enemy on the way back. And that's an important part of Spectral Throw's DPS, is hitting the enemy on the way back. So it was a little bit weird. I didn't do a ton of testing with it, but it seemed like I definitely needed a bit of mark effect. So I was testing Deadeye at some point to make sure I had that extra mark effect, and it felt quite a bit better, or it felt like it was doing something that wasn't just decreasing my damage when it came to the Sniper's Mark, but I'm still not 100% sure about that. So I'd say if you're going to do Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, make sure you have some mark effect. For me right now, I'm at the point where I don't want to press buttons. Obviously, I showcase self-casting the conductivity on the Minotaur, but for real in-game play, I've just been using cast from damage taken. Sometimes I have to wait for the enemy to hit me a couple times to generate the curse, so it slows me down gameplay-wise a little bit, but I'm also just being lazy about not pressing buttons. You can make that choice yourself, and I'm simulating the fact I'm going for an Abyssal Socket pair of boots here, because that is my late game item. I've been working on crafting paladin boots with percent strength, flat strength, and Abyssal Socket. I'm trying to elevate the percent strength, and I'm working through whether or not I want to just YOLO it with the Hinekora lock, or without the Hinekora lock, or buy a Hinekora lock and then try to guarantee the percent strength win. I have, for full disclosure, I've went through 6 bases of 29 quality paladin boots, and there's no good quality paladin boots left on the server. So if I miss this elevation, most likely this pair is going to die next time I try to recombinate this, because you need to recombinate to get these 3 suffixes. Otherwise, the fossil's like 1 in 700, which 1 in 700 hollow fossils, good freaking luck getting that on a small private league. So we're working through whether or not we're going to gamble our Orb of Dominance on the pair of boots. I'm kind of rambling here, but hopefully you're getting the idea of the changes we went for. We went for basically 6 link in our chest, swapping out the clusters, and then upgrading our jewelry. Those are the primary things that changed between the last time you saw this character and now, and that really is the difference in getting 10,000 higher ES than we had before. It really was about that jewelry change and about the tree change, basically going from Juggernaut to Chieftain, and changing our travel node that was giving us Pathfinder, getting the Forbidden Flesh and Flame, going to get Guardian, changing the tree with split personalities, and those jewelry upgrades. Believe it or not, those jewelry upgrades, along with the tree change, they make a massive difference, and they'll take your character to the next level if you go through to make those upgrades. Yeah, anyways, this is just an update on the character if you're curious of what we're doing. I will say this. If you're running Spectral Throw, I'd recommend a cluster with Streamlined. A little bit of proj speed on Spectral Throw feels really good. But also, if you want to go for more min-max single target, another weird thing about Spectral Throw is it gets more damage the slower your proj speed is, but then the clear speed feels terrible. So you have to balance this, and I've been doing Spectral Helix as well to test out on single target. Ultimately, I think both Spectral Helix and Spectral Throw, to really get good single target out of them, you need like a negative reduced proj speed, like a reflected negative reduced proj speed, and outside of that, it's just not ever going to get that insane single target. So I've been testing different things, and yeah, this is probably the version of the character I would recommend going towards, is one with GMP Spectral Throw. That felt the best to play with a little bit of proj speed. I would recommend that. And then later on, if you want to min-max or go for just being stronger, you can always swap in just a better skill like Lightning Strike or Splitting Steel. There's quite a few skills that would just triple your damage without having to change basically anything. Yeah. Anyways, that is the character in its current state. There will be a POV for it in the description of the video if you're curious. And as for the progression of what we're going to do next, I am going to be trying to swap this into a Giga Righteous Fire. I don't think I've tried to do a Giga Righteous Fire since Crucible, and the only reason I'm doing it now is because I want to see if we can beat Connor's strength number. I am very committed to this challenge, and I want to win, and so we're going to pull out all the stops is the idea. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care, and peace out. Have a good one.